I'm a human driver and I managed to drive 1 billion miles and I've never had a traffic ticket. I've never killed anyone. I've never hurt anyone. Absolutely perfect driving record for 1 billion miles. Well, if I were an average human driver in an average car in the US, I would have killed 8 to 12 people, depending on the statistic. So I'm like 10 people ahead, right? Do I get a free
Yeah.
kill?
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't. It doesn't work that way. I'm not saying the Robotaxi people, folks would kill someone on purpose, but I'm illustrating in principle here. Let's be a little less dramatic. Let's just say I went through a red light and I killed someone and I was drunk over the limit. Am I allowed to go to court and say, well, I'm not guilty because I'm still 9 lives ahead, so I get a free
Yeah.
pass on this? The answer is no, you don't.
Yeah.
Because negligence doesn't work that way. Being
Yeah.
statistically safer is not a defense for being reckless, right? You're not allowed to be reckless no
Good.
matter how safe you are on average.
Right.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Junko Yoshida. I'm the editor-in-chief of Phil and Junko on AV safety. And today I have my partner, Phil Koopman, with us because this is one topic I have been dying to talk about because Phil is the author of a book, how safe is safe enough. I mean, this is like a famous phrase that everybody knows, but in fact, what that entails is still a little bit of mystery to most people, I think. All right. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Junko. Well, okay, so here's a slight spoiler.
Yeah.
What I learned writing a book, How Safe is Safe Enough, and
Yeah.
then publishing it, and then spending a year thinking about it and watching what happened on public roads with Robotaxis in San Francisco, is
Hmm.
that was half a book and it only did half the problem. And so I think what we're here to talk about
Yeah.
is mostly what did I learn after I wrote that book that is more
That,
safe enough than safe enough, it turns out. So that's
yeah.
what we're here to talk about. I know that sounds like a riddle, but I promise by the end we'll have unpacked that.
All right. I'm not an engineer, but I covered the engineering world for a long time. And this actually relates to what I learned, things like good enough, right? Engineers always worried about, meeting the, certain number and when is the good enough. And I
Well, there's
think,
some requirement or specification or performance requirement. You have to
right,
pass the test. Right. Yeah.
right, exactly. But safe enough actually is a concept that's it's really related, but at the same time, it actually covers a broader area because we're not talking about just improving one thing on robotaxi or autonomous vehicle in general. It's make it acceptable, socially acceptable. All right, so let's start with the your definition of safe enough, and let's get to the heart of the matter. When people ask you, right, in a conference or the meeting, so Phil, what is really safe enough for my robotaxis? How would you answer that?
Well,
How?
I've always said acceptable safety because people want to say anyone who wants safety for robotaxis is insisting on perfection. And I've certainly never insisted on that. So it's not about perfection, it's
Yeah.
about acceptable safety. But what's happened over the last few years is my understanding of what acceptable safety means has gotten better, has matured. So let me start with the old definition, and then we can pick apart what's wrong with it, and then we can move to the new definition. The
Very good.
original definition back in the Safe Enough book, which everything in there still applies, so it's not wrong. It's just turned out it's only half the story, right? So the first half of the story is you
Yeah.
want to be as safe as a human driver, to be really rigorous about it, no worse than a human driver. And that
Right.
is intuitively, who wants a robotaxi that's scary, dangerous compared to a human driver?
Hmm.
And okay, fine. So we look at that, but then you start asking the question. It sounds so easy, right? And you ask the questions about, well, what do you mean by which human driver? And say, okay, average car on an average road in the United States, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And you say, well, hold on. You're not an average car. You're a top of the line brand new car. The average car in the US is almost 13 years old now, and it doesn't have automatic emergency braking, and its airbags aren't as fancy, and it may not have stability control, and maybe it hasn't been maintained, and all these other things, and maybe it has old nasty tires, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So an average car is not as safe as a new car. Any new car is safer than an average car, whether it has a computer driver or not. That doesn't matter.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's part of it. What about the driver? 20-year-olds are super scary. We won't even get into 16-year-olds. They are super scary compared to someone in middle age, like multiples more dangerous. So
Uh,
if you
uh,
have a robotaxi fleet full of equivalent 18-year-old drivers,
yeah.
and every car on the road is like that, that's
Yeah.
going to be a really bad outcome. Safety is going to be way worse. All right.
Um,
So when you say average driver, now do you mean like the average driver, including the 18-year-olds coming home from a kegger because drunk drivers are a problem too?
yeah. Yeah.
Not everyone's like that, but you're including them in the average, aren't you?
Yeah.
So do you really want it to be as good as a careful, competent, experienced driver, right?
Right.
Or is average enough? Maybe average is enough, but you have to ask the question. Do
Yeah.
you want to include the
This
drunks?
is good. Yeah.
You can make a case for yes, because if you're displacing them, things haven't gotten worse on average.
Right.
But you can also make a case for no, you really want to be better than the drunks. So you have to
Right.
have that discussion, right? And so age matters and the various impairments that drivers have. Okay, but we're not done yet because some states are much more dangerous than other states. And
Ah.
some types of roads are much more dangerous than other types of roads. One I happen to remember is that near my house, the Pennsylvania Turnpike is moderately near my house, and there are state roads that go right next to the turnpike. So they're high-speed, windy roads. There's lots of deer in Pennsylvania. So you're driving on one of those roads at night compared to the turnpike a mile away, and your risk of death is 5 times higher. So,
Jesus.
okay.
Oh,
So which roads are we talking about?
yeah.
It,
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
and are you driving in snow? Or are you not driving in snow? You're driving
No.
in at night. Are you driving in the rain? What's the environmental conditions?
Right.
So you add all this stuff up. And by the way, there's some states much scarier than Pennsylvania and some that are safer. Massachusetts is really safe despite Boston. Go figure, right?
Oh, despite Boston. Okay.
Despite
Well, that's
Boston, it's still
interesting.
really safe. And it isn't just
Interesting.
the drivers because the roads matter too. Why is the Pennsylvania Turnpike so safe? Because they collect all these tolls, and I guess they want to keep spending the money because they keep their job administering the tolls. And they're always building that thing, and it has all the
Oh,
safety
wow.
features you can imagine, and the windy roads through the woods, the 2 lanes, not so much, right? So the
Wow.
roads matter too. It isn't just the
Infrastructure.
drivers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, if you're deploying in a place that has nice weather and really nice roads and drivers who aren't maniacs,
Yeah.
and the population mostly has really old cars, and you have a brandy new car, okay?
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah.
look amazing there.
Yeah. That's
And
yeah.
if you went, you're going to look amazing because it's easy to drive there. And if you go to a place that's really hard to drive, uh, maybe you don't look so good. So better than the national average doesn't mean hardly anything. I mean, if you're 10 times worse, you're kind of done. If you're
Yeah.
10 times better, maybe we're done. But there's
Yeah.
factors of 3 and 4 and 5 involved in variability depending where you're driving and what you're driving. So if
Yeah.
you're 10% better than an average, it means nothing compared to maybe you're better or worse than the local drivers around you. Who knows, right?
Right.
So if you want to claim you're as safe as a human driver,
Yeah.
and you're comparing yourself to national averages, but you're driving in a place and conditions that are really easy,
Yeah.
it's not a
It's
very credible claim. Uh, maybe it's morally acceptable. Maybe people are okay with it, but
yeah.
give me a break.
Yeah.
You're
It's
not
not
really safe.
statistically. Yeah.
Statistically,
Really.
you're just waving your hands,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So if you want
Okay.
to be
Yeah.
serious about this,
Yeah.
you have to say, well, let's look at all the cars in our zip codes at the time of day we drive, and we have to account for the fact we're in safer cars and a bunch of other things. And to its credit, the industry didn't start there, but the industry is going there. So there's been a lot of work on the robotaxi companies trying to say, hey, we're going to take all these kind of factors into account and really get an apples to apples thing. Another example is you could say, well, we're a little bit safer than ride-hail drivers. Well, ride-hail drivers are
Mm.
super scary, it turns out, because they're in a hurry. They're mostly young males. They're in old cars. They're in
I
cheap
see.
cars. Not all of them. I don't want to say it's
Right.
true of every, but and
Yeah.
and I don't know about you, but I've seen the check engine light on so many times in ride-hail, right? So it turns out
Yeah.
statistically they're not as safe as other average drivers, and there are reasons for that. And it doesn't mean we kick ride hail off the road for this reason.
Yeah.
But if you say you're as safe as a ride hail, but your plan is to displace ordinary drives, well,
Yeah.
that safe as a human driver starts running into trouble. If you say we're just going to replace ride hails and it's the same as
Yeah.
safety as ride hails, okay, maybe, right? So it's not, oh, we're safer than the average human. We're done. Nothing to talk about here.
It's
It's actually a
it's a lot.
really complex, nuanced problem.
First thing that the layman like myself thinks, and I think you mentioned this, the acceptably safe, right? And acceptable to whom is the first question that I have. Safe enough also. Safe enough for whom?
Well, that's a great question. And it turns out statistical safety is not particularly compelling to many other stakeholders, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
and, and,
right.
and there are reasons for this. So you could be, well, if you're 100 times safer, if you're 1,000 times safer, if we went from 40,000 road deaths ballpark per year down to 40, I don't think you'd get a lot of complaints about the specifics of those 40 crashes. It would still be unfortunate to be one of the 40 people,
Right.
but the savings in life is so massive
Yeah.
that societally, I think we'd be willing to accept a lot of problems with those 40 fatalities. We'd still want to
Mm,
work on them, but we'd say, look, you went from 40,000 down to 40.
mm.
What's the problem?
Right. Right.
But anything less than maybe a factor of 100 isn't as compelling, it turns out.
Huh.
And some folks have said, well, you want us to be 100 times safer before we go on the road. That's ridiculous. Like, no, I'm not saying you have to be 100 times safer. What I'm saying is, and it's not just me, I've seen this elsewhere too, it's 100 times safer is so compelling, the fine print doesn't matter. All right.
Ah.
But
Ah.
if you want to be less than 100 times safe, now you have to start asking other questions. Right. And so that's the deal. The statistically net safe number of fatalities divided by number of miles, number of injuries divided by miles, uh, if it's factor of 100, factor of 1,000 times better than the average US human driver, there's kind of nothing to talk about. You're done. That's so
Right.
amazingly
You're
safe.
done. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Yeah.
sure, we can always improve safety, but it's going to be hard to see pushback on that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're only 10% safer and the people who are dying are completely different than the people who would have died, now
Ah.
you've got a problem. Okay.
Right.
All
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
and there's some other issues. So engineers are amazingly utilitarian. They say number go down, that good, we're done. Nothing else to talk about. All right. But there's more to that. All right. And by the way, I want to make sure I get this in here. We're talking about the outcomes. Okay.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that because you don't know how it's going to turn out when you go on the road, by the way. You
Ah.
have to
Okay.
wait a few years to see how that turns
Oh,
out.
I see. No, that's
So
true. Yeah.
there's more to the safety discussion than this. We're going to circle back to that, but I just want to point out that
Yeah. Yeah.
waiting to see how it turns out
Yeah.
is
It's
what if the
important.
answers?
Yeah.
What if the answer is you were not as safe, but all these people have died in the meantime, right? So this
Yeah.
is an issue. Okay,
Yeah.
but where should you be shooting? What's the goal? The goal, I would say, it's going to be hard to be more than a few percent worse than a human driver. If you're
Mm.
5% worse than a human driver, maybe that's okay if you're providing compelling social value. Certainly, early aircraft were pretty dangerous, but then we
Ah.
worked on it and fixed it. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but let's just say, on average, no worse than a human driver is something really desirable. And you're going to aim for that. And if you're off by a few percent, it's something that can be worked out. Let's say that's there. But what else is there? All right. Let me give you an example. And I stress this is a hypothetical example. This is hypothetical. But the point of the hypothetical is to prove to you that even if net safety is better, it's not necessarily acceptable. Okay. So
Mm.
what if it used to be 40,000 people died a year? What if it's down to 10,000? So we just saved 30,000 lives.
Hmm.
Pure utilitarian engineers are, well, hey, you saved 30,000 lives. What's your problem?
Yeah.
But what if, and again, hypothetical, what if all 10,000 people who died were pedestrians? In fact, they were children in a marked school crosswalk with flashing lights, and the Robotaxi blew through a red light, went past the crossing guard, and mowed down this kid in a pedestrian crosswalk on his way to school. And that happened 10,000 times per year. Would that be okay?
No.
There's no way that's going to
No,
be okay. There's
huge.
no way. And
Yeah.
what's the headline going to be? Is the headline going to be Robotaxi save 30,000 lives, or is the Robotaxi going to be headline going to be Robotaxis kill 10,000 kids in a school zone? Well, it's going to be the second one, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Now,
definitely.
now I could be accused of trying to make this really extreme, but the point is not that this is going to happen. The point is, if you think it's okay for that outcome, 30,000 saved, 10,000 are all school kids, and nothing to see here. Let's just let it rip, nothing to fix.
Yeah.
I just
That's
don't believe anyone can really think that. Okay.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
what did I prove? What I think I proved with that thought experiment is that there's more to safety than the numbers.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
circumstances and other factors matter to
Yeah.
acceptability.
Yeah.
So it's not okay to say number go down. That's it. Now we'll give you another one, and
Sure.
this has to do with tort negligence. All right. So
Okay.
this is a legal principle,
Yeah.
and it ends up in the same place, but it's another legal principle to show you that net statistical isn't the whole answer,
Hmm.
right? And that this is an existing societal value. All right. So let's say I go a billion miles with a bee. I'm a human driver and I managed to drive a billion miles. I don't know how I do that, but I managed to drive a billion miles with a bee. And
Yeah.
I've never had a traffic ticket. I've never killed anyone. I've never hurt anyone. Absolutely perfect driving record for a billion miles. All right.
Yep.
Well, if I were an average human driver in an average car in the US, I would have killed 8 to 12 people, depending on the statistics. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm like 10 people ahead, right? Do I get a free
Yeah.
kill?
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And again, I'm not saying the Robotaxi people, folks would kill someone on purpose, but I'm illustrating in principle here
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that let's be a little less dramatic. Let's just say I'm driving tired and I don't intend to, but I go through a red light and I kill someone. But I went through a red light and I killed someone and I was tired or I was drunk. Let's say I was drunk over the limit. Just, okay, let's just say that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to go to court and say, well, I'm not guilty because I've saved I'm still 9 lives ahead, so I get a free
Yeah.
pass on this? The answer is no, you don't,
Yeah.
because negligence doesn't work that way. Being
Yeah.
statistically safer is not a defense for being reckless, right?
Yeah. There
So
you
that's
go.
another
Yeah.
example where
That's what
statistical safety is not the only constraint. You're not allowed to be reckless no
it
matter
is.
how safe you are on average.
Right.
Okay. So there's a couple examples that there must be more than statistical.
Yes. Yeah.
But now we can sort of get to what's that more,
Yeah, what
right?
other things are, what other factors are we talking about here then, right?
Yeah,
We're talking about the multi-factors for the multi-stakeholders. So let's go down the list of the other factors we need to take in considerations.
sure. There's a general theme to this. I call them risk hotspots. I may have made that up, but I call them risk hotspots. That people are averse to things being generally dangerous, but they'll tolerate actually quite a lot of risk. Driving, especially in the US, is quite dangerous. It's much more dangerous than in a lot of European countries. People will still tolerate that if they see they're getting value out of it. But what they have trouble tolerating more is risk hotspots.
Hmm.
So something might be moderately dangerous and you decide to accept it, but what you cannot abide is risk hotspots. So let's talk about people. And
Yeah.
what's really interesting here is the AV industry loves to talk about people hotspots, but when it comes to robotaxis, they want to argue statistics. The
Yeah.
fact is that one fatality per 100 million miles, I wish it were better. We know you can do better because Europe does better. But
Yeah.
anything one part per 100 million is really rare.
Yeah.
Right? But some people will die from car crashes, but it isn't like everyone dies in a car crash.
Right.
It's like a 1% kind of effect. 1% is high, but it's only 1%, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it that we have a problem with? Well, we have a problem with risk hotspots. Well, let me give you some examples. Drunk
Sure.
driving. People don't like
Uh,
drunk driving is bad, right? That's a risk
yeah.
hotspot because something like a third, 30, 40%, depending on the year or some other stuff, a
They,
significant number of fatalities have to do with drunk driving.
yeah.
Right? What's another one? Distraction with cell phone, down around 10%. Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
Well-known factors. Yes.
well-known
Yes.
factor. So if you
Yeah.
have a well-known factor and it is perceived that this is a factor that could be fixed, there's societal pressure to fix it.
Yeah.
Now, drunk driving, we're better at drunk driving than we used to be. We could be much better, but there's
Yes.
societal pressure for sure. No one's going to say, oh, I'm twice as safe as an average driver. Look at me. So I'm allowed to drive drunk once in a while. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way,
No,
right?
no, yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to take credit for good driving skills to engage in a risk hotspot. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So we know that people have risk hotspots,
Yes.
but robotaxis are also going to have risk hotspots and they're going to be different. Some will look the same, but they'll be different. There was a cruise robotaxi crash which smashed into the back of a bus. All right. This
Ah,
is a while back. And the
yeah.
short version of the story was it had been trained on 40-foot long buses. And so it ignored the last 20 feet of a 60-foot long bus and just smashed into it. It saw it. There was no extenuating circumstance. The camera saw it, the lidar saw it, everything saw the bus, and it said, well, it must not be there because I know buses are not that long, and smashed in. All right. In broad daylight, everything.
Wow.
Now, if you saw that crash picture and from a human driver, you would say, well, they must have been texting, right? You would totally say,
Yeah, right. Or drunk,
well,
right? I mean,
or drunk, right?
yeah.
Or not paying attention, or staring at the whatever, right? Tourists staring around. Okay. Robotaxi, actually, they are doing data comms, but that's not a problem. Texting isn't an issue for them.
Yeah.
What was it doing? It was driving stupid, right? It
Yeah.
was driving stupid. So we will see some crashes that are technology limits. A good example, there was a
Mm,
recall for level 2 vehicles that had troubles around flashing lights. It seemed like it was flashing lights, and they would have a high crash rate near emergency response scenes on high-speed highways.
okay.
And we know that flashing lights are tough on computer vision, so that's why we thought that's what it was.
Right.
So what you have is if you have an identifiable pattern
Yes.
that it feels like it could be fixed,
Yeah.
that's a risk hotspot. So one of
Right.
them, so for people, it's driving drunk and texting all this, but for cars, it's there are some of them that are based on the crash specifics, but there's some that are based on the outcome. So let me see if I can go down a list and you can help me
Yeah.
out if I forget one
Sure.
that's in the
Yeah.
paper. One of them is reckless driving. So you're not allowed to drive recklessly, even if you overall have a safe record. And a good example is going by a school bus with its flashing lights that the law requires you to stop and you go by anyway.
Yes.
You can say, well, we're such good drivers, we would never hit a kid coming out behind from an occluded vehicle, even though that did actually happen
It
to that
happened.
company.
Yeah.
It did happen to the company, but that's aside. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say I'm a careful driver, so I'm allowed to break the law.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that, right? And you're supposed to get a traffic ticket for breaking the law. But if heaven forbid there's actually a crash and someone gets harmed, you've got a problem because all the statistical, well, we have so many 100 million miles of safe driving. Yeah, but you broke the law and hurt someone. I don't want to
Right.
hear about the safe driving. That's not how it works.
Right.
Okay, so one of the constraints is you're not allowed to drive recklessly. If you want to be safe, let's say you had the world's best sensors and you said, I ignore traffic lights. I only stop when there's cross traffic. Otherwise, I go blasting through the traffic. That
Ah.
you could say, I guarantee I will never have a crash, but I ignore traffic lights. Let's say you say that, right?
Yeah.
Are people going to really be happy with that? Well,
No.
you might be able to argue it because everyone's so amazed and in awe of your technology. But the first crash that comes along, that's going to be a problem.
Right.
They're going to take back that permission, right? That
Yeah.
social license is going to get revoked the first
Yeah.
time you have a
Yeah. You
crash,
broke
right?
the law. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
You're
first
not
thing.
allowed
Yeah.
to do that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you want to be acceptably safe, not what can we get away with, but acceptably safe for societal purposes, you have to follow the laws. And if you don't like the laws, you think the laws don't apply to you, go get the laws changed, right? So
Ah,
that's one. You have to follow the laws. The next one is you're not allowed to have a disproportionately higher risk on vulnerable populations. That one's
mm,
complicated. Let me unpack it. But
mm.
let's say that you go, this is actually the first example I gave. You reduce or keep common. Let's say you have constant rate of harm. On average, you're no worse than a human. You're not better, but you're no worse.
Mm.
But the number of pedestrian fatalities doubles and the number of occupant fatalities goes down.
Okay.
Okay. That one's
Ah,
especially problematic because the pedestrians aren't benefiting from your technology.
right.
It's a, well, same number of people died, yeah, but twice as many pedestrians. And maybe those are folks who can't afford the technology.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
going to be a problem.
Yeah.
It's not okay to kill the poor people. It doesn't work that way, right? I'm being blunt about it, but that's a
Yeah. Yes,
social
yes,
issue.
yes.
You're not allowed to
Right.
do that.
Inequality. Yeah,
Inequality
exactly.
is a problem,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, inequity is a problem. But frankly, if it worked the other way, you're not allowed to kill the rich people either. It doesn't work either way.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
that's
something you're
true.
allowed to
Yeah.
do, right? But it's that if you have pedestrians, that's a problem because they're vulnerable. They're called vulnerable road users. Well, killing vulnerable people is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But also just uh, any identifiable population demographic will be a problem. Okay, if your cameras have trouble detecting if some people are pedestrians based on skin color or
Yeah.
based on the type of clothing they wear,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's going to correspond with ethnic groups, and that's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if the net numbers are the same, patterns matter. If you run over just kids because short people you can't see, right? Or
Yeah.
there was a problem with airbags. Original airbags in cars, all
Oh,
the
that's
crash
right.
deaths
Yeah.
dummies were male, and
Yeah.
women were disproportionately
Yeah.
killed in
Because,
airbag collisions because they weren't designed for them. And what did they do? They fixed it.
yeah.
All right. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't get this right on the first day. The airbags is a great story. You didn't get it right on the first day, but there was social pressure to fix it. It took
Yeah.
longer than I would have liked, but there was
Yeah.
social pressure. It was not acceptable to do that and had to be
Right.
fixed.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's a good example. As a member of the press, what always surprised me is something happens on streets that I had never thought would anybody do that. It seems to me there's a hot spot. For example, the autonomous vehicles, going right into the flood zone, right?
Yeah, right.
And how about that? If you are a human driver, that is, well, they know it's not going to be safe to go right in there, so they take a different route. But
Sure. So this corresponds to the notion of absence of unreasonable risk.
ah,
Now, if you look at the ISO 26262, which is a functional safety standard for cars, but also how NHTSA does recalls, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, how recalls work, and how safety standards tend to work in the automotive industry, they have this thing called absence of unreasonable risk. So
okay.
they equate safety with unreasonable risk. Now, that's a piece of safety, but it's not all of safety. Okay.
Mm,
All
mm,
right. So where do you end up? If you say, well, this car went into a floodwater and we're in Arizona and it's never flooded here before. Well, that just means you haven't been in Arizona long enough, but it does it does flood. Camping in a dry gulch wash is a really bad idea because that water comes up fast, right? But you've never seen a flood before, catches you by surprise, even though there's some safety standards that say watch out for floods, but you didn't do that, right? You
Yeah.
have no idea. You drive in floodwaters once. You go, well, man, that's really weird. Things happen, and hopefully no one was hurt. But by like the 10th time you've gone into floodwaters, that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
That's looking to me like a risk hotspot. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So if there's a failure that happens over and over and over again, at some point you can't say, oh, it's rare, we can ignore it. You have to start paying attention. And the bigger your fleet is, the more of these rare events become common because a 1 in a million shot probably doesn't happen to one car, but
Yeah.
it's every day. For 10 million cars, that's every couple hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how
No,
that
yeah.
works.
Yeah.
So what absence of unreasonable risk is that if you see a pattern and there's a way to fix that pattern, you have to go fix it. And so
Right.
this is how recalls work. We
Mm,
have center console screens that keep failing. It didn't happen one time, it happened a bunch of times. We
mhm.
have tires that explode because they don't have enough air and they fail. And so the tire one, there was a bunch of issues with crashes, low pressure in tires, and eventually they required a tire pressure warning on the dashboard because they
Right.
decided there was an unreasonable risk from tire explosions because it was a cost-effective way to put a warning in that you could mitigate this,
I
right? And so
see.
that's how there's a FMVSS. Uh, there's a federal motor vehicle safety standard in the U.S. requiring this tire pressure warning
I
because
see.
they identified a trend of crashes and they said there's a way to fix this. Okay. So
Interesting.
you're not allowed to have unreasonable risk. And if you do, then you end up going through a recall process.
Yeah.
Now, to look at this, try to be precise about this. Safety includes no things that will cause a recall that haven't been fixed, right? So the fiction in the NHTSA regulatory world is you're safe until this pattern has been identified. You're unsafe until you fix it. Once you fix it, you're back to perfect again. Okay. And the reality is, lack of recalls doesn't mean you're safe. Having a
That's
recall
right.
means you're unsafe. Lack
Yeah.
of recalls doesn't mean you're safe. It's just the NHTSA folks will say that being conformant to these standards is a minimum floor on safety.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily safe enough, but if you're worse than that, you got a problem.
I see.
And in the written
It's
piece, I
subject to record. Yeah.
yeah, in the
Yeah.
written piece, I have I have a little fun with this. It's like when you're a kid, there's an important life lesson you learn, which
Oh,
is
right.
there's a subtle but important difference between edible and non-toxic. So if you have a brightly colored crayon and it says non-toxic on it, and as a
Yeah.
kid, it was, what does it mean non-toxic?
That's
It's like,
it.
it doesn't mean you should eat it. It just kill you if you do, right? Theoretically.
Yeah.
And so absence of unreasonable risk is the non-toxic in the world of
The
automotive safety. It's not,
yeah.
there's unsafe, there's
Yes.
absence of and safe is way up here, right?
Right.
Acceptable safety is way up here because
Yeah.
it doesn't behave obnoxiously, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's really as safe as you want it to be.
Yeah. That's you're not there yet. Okay. I want to bring up about this thing about blame, right?
Yeah, right.
And the thing that bothers me by reading some of the reports, I mean, the companies who had trouble with the road, whether it's ADAS or AVs, they have to make a report, SGO, right?
It's a standing general order reporting of level
Right.
2 and above crashes, right?
But
That's
if
what we're
you
talking about.
read those
Yeah,
reports, if
yeah.
you read these reports, a lot of times whoever who wrote it, is sort of make it sound as though like it wasn't really our fault.
Well,
Some
we know who writes them.
yeah,
They're lawyers who write them.
lawyers.
It's not the engineers. So in the cruise investigations, the lawyers signed off on that, right?
Yeah,
It was not an
that's
engineering document. It's a regulatory compliance document.
I
That's the world of
see.
lawyers, and
Yeah.
they get paid. And I'm not complaining. They get paid. They do their job. It is what it is. They
Mhm.
get paid to make it sound as much not their fault as possible.
Right.
Right? That they get
But
paid, and they're not supposed to lie, but you can tell the story with a particular point of view. And
yeah,
where Cruise got into trouble was they left out some relevant parts. That's where they get in trouble.
right.
Basically, lie of omission, right? That's where
Yeah,
they got into trouble.
yeah. But just because you didn't get the blame for whatever instance that happened doesn't mean you're safe either.
Yeah, and I've seen some of these crash reports where I just start laughing when I see them trying to blame everyone else. There's this one. Well, I crashed into that because what was I going to do? It's like, come on. There was one where there was a pickup truck being towed by a tow truck, and a Robotaxi crashed into it because they said, well, the tow truck did not have the pickup truck straight behind it. It was a little bit of an angle. And and what they wanted you to think was, and so of course, I mean, what were we going to do? Of course, we crashed into it. What choice did we have, right? Come on. Oh, and by the way, two Robotaxis from the same company crashed into that same towed pickup truck twice on that same trip.
That
It's
is
like,
not good.
it's like, and you're blaming the tow truck, really? I mean, if you had two kids and they both said that they had crashed into this tow truck, because what were they going to do?
Yeah.
You'd ground them for a year, right?
Yeah, right.
All right.
Hit them on the
So a lot of
head.
times, just like, what? Oh, come on, come on.
Yeah,
You got to be kidding me, right?
yeah.
So the blame game is, well, they can say, well, it's never our fault, right? And the catch is, they're just saying it. There hasn't been a court proceeding to establish blame. There may not have even been in some cases, there is, some cases not, an insurance proceeding to apply rules. They're just saying it's not our fault. They're just blaming someone else.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
you could go down the rabbit hole of, well, we should figure out who's really to blame in each crash. But I'm going to say it doesn't matter.
yeah.
It's actually irrelevant to almost all aspects of safety. So let me do the footnote, get out the footnote out of the way.
Yeah.
If you're breaking a road rule, you can be blamed for the crash because you broke a road rule and it led to a crash. But I'm
Hmm.
going to say even that is the wrong way to think about it. So I think
Hmm.
anytime you have a company talking about safety and they bring blame into the equation, they're putting up a smoke screen. They're trying to hide what really matters. So
Uh,
if anyone talks about blame,
yeah.
just
That's
that conversation is not useful.
wow.
Okay. So what
Okay.
should I do? So what should I do? Junko
Yeah,
asked.
exactly. Yeah.
What should I do?
Because yeah. Yeah.
What the way to look at it is uh, commercial drivers, and I want to thank my friend at Aurora, Nat Buse, for this insight. He said at a conference once. He said commercial drivers are not judged on blame. They're because they do heavy trucks, right?
Hmm.
So what they said was, what Nat said was, they're judged on whether they avoided a crash that could have been avoided.
Ah.
Right. So commercial drivers are supposed to have extra skills and they're
Right.
supposed to not get their heavy truck in trouble. So if somebody's acting crazy on the road in front of them, they're supposed to slow down because they know nothing
Yeah.
good can come for that. Instead of
I
just going along and saying, well, he drove in front. What was I supposed to do? It's like, you're supposed to know the guy was nuts and stay away from him is what you were supposed to do. You were
right.
supposed to see problems
But
and react as soon as you see them instead of waiting to the last second and jamming on the brakes, for
right.
example.
Right.
Or well, the example for my personal example is uh, if there's a really steep icy hill and there's a heavy truck and you follow the heavy truck too closely going up the hill and he stops and he starts sliding backwards. The second time you do that, it's your own fault. You should have known
Yeah.
that was going to happen,
Yeah.
right?
You should
You
have
can't
learned. Yeah.
blame the guy for sliding down. It's like, come on, what were you thinking, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so the standard isn't whose fault it is. It's could the
Ah.
robotaxi have avoided the crash by being a smart driver? Could they have noticed this is a high risk context? This contextual situation has high risk. There's kids running around all over the place near a school or a playground, and you don't see a kid, so you just drive normal speed. It's like, no, you slow down
No. Yeah.
because what happens next is a kid appears from nowhere and you need
Right.
to be ready for that. You don't
Yeah.
say, well, I didn't see a kid, so I went the speed limit. Come on, right?
Yeah.
We all know that that's this the classic. This might have even been on my driver test. I don't remember it. I remember it was in the driver manual, right? A ball rolls into the road between two cars. There's a playground next to it. What happens next? Well, a kid appears,
Okay.
right? Of course a kid appears, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you don't stop for a ball because the ball is no big deal.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, that is the sort
yeah.
of like a judgment for the anticipation, right? I mean, it's
Right.
again, things
So you
haven't
have to
happened
anticipate
yet.
it.
Right.
So it isn't
Right.
about are you to blame? It's
Yeah.
it's could a reasonable, competent, unimpaired human driver have anticipated a higher risk situation and have modified their risk exposure by slowing down or avoiding that road or something like that? And
Right.
if they could have, then you're not to blame, but you failed to measure up to defensive driving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so now what about blame? Well, blame is just an extreme case of failing to measure up to defensive driving.
Yeah.
If you see a car coming through an intersection and you're not sure he's going to stop, I don't care if your light is green, stop and wait for him to go because you don't know how it's going to turn out.
Right.
Don't say light's green, I'm okay, and I got hit. Well, it's not my
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah. That's
Now, for sure, there are times when physics says you can't do it, right? But physics says you can't do it that well. By the time I noticed he went through the light, I was already in the intersection. That's a
yeah.
physics argument, but that's a deflection.
Yeah.
It's when you saw he was going faster than he should before you entered the intersection, you could have slowed down there. You chose not to. That's the decision point I care about, not the by the time it was too late, it was too late.
Right. Right.
So I don't really care about blame for this stuff. And
Yep.
by the way, some crashes there is no one at fault. Somebody still died. Doesn't mean they didn't die, right?
No, that's
And
true.
and also blame is sort of a legal thing. Sometimes the blame assignment isn't just in some sense, right? It doesn't feel just.
Yeah.
And the law works how the law works. We don't have to go there because it's not relevant for safety. What's relevant is, could you have avoided the crash and did you do your best? And if you didn't, are you fixing it so the next time you will?
Ah, that's a better framing. Yeah. No,
So
that's true.
my
Yeah.
threshold for acceptable safety is
Yeah.
avoids all reasonably avoidable crashes. Say the
Right.
word reasonable, And by the way, learns from experience.
Yeah. There you go. That's good. All right. Any other factors that we should consider when we make a judgment or when we decide whether it's safe enough today, the way technology is?
Well, let's come back to something I said up front, which is when you're measuring retrospectively, well, how many crashes were there? You
Yeah.
don't know how that's going to turn out at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, there's ways to get safety other than driving around. So Junko, would you, or have
Yeah,
you ever, who knows,
yeah.
been on an airplane that does not comply to all industry safety standards?
Of course not. I hope
Yeah.
not.
Well, unless you've been on a home built or something like that,
Yeah,
probably not.
right.
Commercial airliners,
Yeah.
well, the FAA is there to make sure they have a thing called type approval that they're not allowed to fly with passengers until they conform to safety standards and the FAA checks that the testing isn't to see. They don't test airplanes by flying for 1 billion hours and seeing if it falls out of the sky. I mean,
Yeah.
they used
Oops.
to do a little more of that back in the
Yeah.
day, but now
Yeah.
they have safety standards and they
Yeah.
say, well, we're going to check that you conform to all the safety standards. And our testing is we're going to run the what happens if the brakes fail when you're landing test, and we're going to run this test and then that test and the other test,
Right.
right? So they're going to run a bunch of tests, but the tests are to cover known safety problems from previous eras, which
Yeah.
in automotive we have that. The Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard, a lot of that is we know this is a problem, so we have a test to check that you've done some mitigation.
Mm.
Okay, that's part of it. But the
Right.
other thing is we're pretty sure your software is good because you've done all the engineering rigor required by the standards, because you can't test all aspects of software, all right? And so we're
Yeah.
going to actually, the FAA sends representatives into the room to check on the design reviews and make sure the process is being followed.
Okay.
And in the automotive world in general, some companies voluntarily do that to some degree. Suppliers do it more than manufacturers, but there's
Yes.
no law in the U.S. saying you have to do any of that. And so you could just put this car
Uh,
together, put it on the road, and test it, and see how it turns out. So part of acceptable safety in
yes.
every other field except cars is that you conform to your own industry safety standards that the industry wrote. In cars, that's not a part of it,
Yeah.
and so we're going to see. It's not societally required yet. I suspect if we see quality problems,
Yeah.
as we see those, there's going to be more and more pressure to conform to standards.
Yeah.
Thus far, the car industry has gotten away with not doing that, but they're also very proficient at blaming human drivers. And for if there's a design defect, they blame the driver for not having mitigated it.
Yeah.
Simple example, your engine goes nuts, full wide open throttle.
Yeah.
What's the fault? Well, you should have pressed the brake. What's your problem? How come you didn't press the brake? Right? So they blame the driver for not mitigating the design fault,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that is gone on quite a lot, not all the time, but it's a remarkable trend. But
Yeah.
guess what? Robotaxis don't have a driver. So that playbook just expired. And so
Ah.
I think over time, we're going to see pressure to follow industry standards, but that's a 10 and 20-year kind of pressure, not a 1 or 2 year kind of pressure.
Wow.
So we'll
Yeah,
see.
that's true. They can't blame the driver did something wrong because the
There's
driver
no
is
driver. There's
you.
no
Yeah.
driver. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now they
Yeah.
can say we're going to blame nobody by saying, well, the driver doesn't have duty of care, and that's a whole different episode we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
Right now the plan is to blame nobody, and
Yeah.
we're going to
Yeah.
see how that works out. Oh, when
Yeah.
you have 100 cars, stuff like that isn't as big a deal. When you get 1 million cars, you can't hide from things like liability. You just can't. So another risk hotspot is going to be failed in ways that would have been avoided if you'd followed a standard. And that'll show up first as product defect liability. The standard says you should have done this, you didn't do it. Okay. It'll
Ah.
show up there.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
immediately, but it'll come home to roost. If there's an
Yeah.
accepted practice and you didn't follow it,
Yeah.
and following it would have avoided a crash, sounds to me like you're kind of exposed, right?
Have we missed anything else? This is the oft to use terminology that is kind of misused, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Well, let me try and go high level and wrap up the multiple aspects because there's
Okay.
a particular way to think about this. What you see is the companies just harping on the net risk metric, right? Fewer deaths, good, nothing else to discuss.
Ah.
And what we saw unravel in San Francisco was that whole narrative because there are all these issues of stories about what reasonable people thought were safety concerns that had nobody died, didn't affect the number. Okay, you're blocking a fire truck and nobody died that time. They parked in firehouse driveways blocking fire trucks in.
Yeah.
That sounds like a safety problem to me, even if you can't, but and they would say, well, nobody died. Well, this time, it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
What would happen if a human driver did that?
Right.
That
Exactly.
we would say
The-
there are all these behaviors that you'd say, well, if a human driver did that, we would say they're a bad, unsafe driver. And the robotaxi company is saying, well, we haven't killed anyone, so it doesn't count. It's like at some
Yeah,
point,
that's a problem. Yeah.
the fact that we would think a human driver is unsafe for doing these things has to reflect on the robotaxis. And so watching that play out is how I came to realize that net statistical, as hard as it is, isn't the entire argument. There's more to it. There's a bunch of things you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to blow through red traffic lights. You're just not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
claiming you're such a good driver you'll never crash doesn't work for humans. It shouldn't work for robotaxis. So what
Yeah.
we end up with is there are different stakeholders. There are the folks who run the emergency services. There are the police who enforce traffic laws.
Right.
There are all sorts of things. There's the tort negligence court system. They
Yeah.
all impose rules on human driver behavior as what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do.
Right.
And those rules can't just evaporate because you're a robotaxi. Now you
Because you're the future.
maybe want to have new rules for robotaxis, but we don't have that. You can't just say, oh, none of those rules apply because we're a computer. That's going to just
Yeah.
break society. You can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead, let's have a framework where we talk about how to incorporate those. Now, if you have a single metric, the
Yes.
catch with a single metric is you have to have a weighted sum. We're going to have 30% ablaze road rules, and 10% is doesn't block fire trucks, and so many percent is net
Ah,
fatalities, and so many percent is net severe injuries and all that. The
yeah.
the single metrics have to go that way, okay? Because
Wow.
you have to have a bunch of factors that go in, and you have to sum them up. And the problem with
Oh,
any weighted metric approach is whoever gets the high weight gets to outvote the other guys.
I know. Yeah, that seems very unfair to me. The who gets to decide how much weight that I get, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
it forces these uncomfortable trade-offs. And I've had some folks on social media say these trade-offs are inevitable, but I disagree. So, like, again, hypothetical example,
Yes.
if net harm is 99%, okay, and running through red lights is 1%. So if I save one life, how many red lights am I allowed to run through?
Yeah. It
You know,
becomes zero
and by
sum
the way,
game. I mean,
the one life I saved, all the rest could be killed running through red lights because it doesn't affect the math there, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it just when you try and get a single number,
Yeah.
inevitably you have these imponderables and I would say unanswerable questions of, well, there's apples and oranges. How many oranges is an apple? It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
th and human drivers aren't allowed to do that. Human drivers aren't allowed to say, well, I'm going to break the law because, well, you can do that and you have to make the choice, the argument to the police and to the judge, and they have to find it compelling.
Yeah.
But discretionarily breaking laws is frowned upon.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
have a really good story to tell. And you know
Yeah.
what? If a robotaxi had the same story, I'd be okay with it. I'm okay holding them to the human type standards. But you're not allowed to just say, well, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to run through red lights, and if I kill someone, I'm just going to pay off the family. You know, that, you're not allowed
That
to
is
do
not
that.
good.
You're
Yeah.
not allowed
No,
to do
no.
that, right? But
Yeah.
but a single optimized risk metric ends up in that exact place.
Interesting. That is true. I hadn't
It
thought about it that way.
But
Yeah.
it's like, well, our number of fatalities went down and we paid off the victims. What's your problem? And the problem is, no, you're not allowed to do that in our society.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you want to change the rules, great discussion to have, but you're not allowed to unilaterally decide we're going to game the metric this way. So what's the alternative? And that's true of any single metric. People love single metrics. I just want a simple one number.
Yeah.
All simple numbers are lies. Some of them are useful. I'm quoting George Box. I'm stealing from George Box about all models are wrong. Some models are useful. All
Right.
single numbers are wrong. Some are useful. But I'm going to say for safety, net aggregate safety metric isn't useful because there are too many competing interests that are hard to compare, hard to boil down to a single risk number or currency number. It isn't just about
Mm,
risk. So
yeah.
what can you do instead? What you can do instead is a long time ago, there's a CMU professor. I mean, I worked at CMU, so I have to wave
All
the CMU
right.
flag, right?
Yeah.
There's a CMU professor, Herb Simon, who won Nobel Prize for economics, okay? And one of the things he realized is that some problems are not about optimization, they're about satisficing, right? And it's the notion of good enough, not good enough as in it's terrible, but we're going to claim it's good enough. I don't mean the sarcastic good enough. I mean the real
Right.
good enough, right? Good enough is good enough. Satisficing, I have a satisficing problem. He noticed that engineers are trained to optimize and they love to optimize, But there's this saying, at some point you have to shoot the engineers and go into production, right? You have to stop them from optimizing.
Stop.
Stop
Yeah.
optimizing,
Right.
let's go to production or we're never going to ship.
Yeah.
And so in the real world, it's a satisficing solution. You have a threshold. You say, here's my threshold. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I'm below the threshold, it's not good enough. Above the threshold, it's good. Up here, down here, is it good? Yes, no, right?
Yeah.
And this ties in with the notion that nobody can know everything. If you're
Right.
looking for something, you
Yeah.
don't have to check every possibility. You just keep checking possibilities till you find one that's good enough for your taste. When you go to the supermarket and there's 1,000 oranges, do
Yeah.
you squeeze every single orange? Or do you stop when you find one that's good enough, right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah. The first one.
satisficing approach.
Yeah.
In the real
It
world, the
didn't suck,
satisfying approach is at some point you just say good enough, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's good enough. And various people have different amounts of how many they'll squeeze. That's a whole different social cultural thing. But some point good enough's good enough. Okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
be optimum. The cost of being optimum isn't worth it because at some point you're fine. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So and applies to job hunting, applies to lots of things in life. Satisficing
Sure.
is just you do enough work to get something that is acceptable. That's why I use the word acceptable safety. It's
Yeah.
acceptable and you move on. The catch here is there's multiple things multiple dimensions it has to be acceptable on. So trying to optimize a single metric necessarily trades different aspects off. It's okay to trade them off, but none of them can be below the floor. You have to be
Ah,
acceptable on every single
every
dimension.
single.
Now, whatever discretion, whatever flexibility you have left, if you want to make profit, go, man. We're in a
Yeah.
capitalist society. You want to make profit, go make profit, but don't fall below the floors.
I
If you
see.
want to sell on safety and you say, I want to be even more safe, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to end it because yeah, it is the complexities of multiple stakeholders at stake, right?
Right.
When we discuss this.
Acceptable safety is you have to meet the threshold requirements of all your stakeholders.
Yeah.
And then beyond that is gravy, which is completely different than optimizing a single number.
All right. Very good. Thank you. I learned a lot. I'm glad you mentioned Herb Simon. This is you and I talked about this before, but this is great. It's a good discussion. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Junko.